You recall we had this discussion of extinct. And the reason I bring it up is that I wanted to thank Grace and York for that example of the uh, Pythagorean theorem, I think it was, where things could go unextinct. So it's sort of like zombies, the undead preens. And I had not considered that. So this is really desirable to me because I, of course, now added a paragraph observing that fact to the document. So thank you, Grayson. And then I want to go back to this next thing.
The fundamental thesis of this article is that all preens obey the following law. All preens struggle to avoid extinction. I have used the word struggle for historical reasons. Chapter 3 of On the Origin of Species is titled Struggle for Existence. However, as Darwin made clear, struggle in the context of evolution need not have some of the connotations associated with the word in common use. For example, when two species of flowering plants struggle with one another to attract bees that will spread their pollen, there is no apparent conflict or suffering. The plants are not aware of preens or their struggle. This is the case with all living things, including humans, with the exception of those modern humans who have learned about evolution through scholarship.
The plants are not aware of preens or their struggle. And this is the case with all living things, including humans, with the exception of those modern humans who have learned about evolution through scholarship. So, for example, the plants and bacteria and humans know nothing about genes, or more properly, genetic preens. Okay, so why does the plant not know it has genes inside of itself?
It doesn't need you to be a successful plant.
Excellent, William. Exactly. It not only doesn't need to, but if it wanted to know about those things, if the genes for some reason wanted the plant to know about such things, it would have to have something in the plant that would know about such things. And that might mean, some sort of memory device, some sort of rewiring of whatever the plant's wiring is. I don't know. But unless having that knowledge would help the plant genes survive, it'd just be baggage. And baggage can be expensive to a living thing in its struggle to survive. So for that matter, this is also true of humans. You only know about genes because you guys are scholars. Yes? We weren't born knowing about genes any more than the plant was.
The works of Darwin and subsequent scientists have allowed us to understand how the insulin preen has struggled to avoid extinction, but can it really be that the Hamlet soliloquy preen has also struggled to avoid extinction? The answer is yes, as we will see in the struggle to survive.
Because we understand Darwinism and genes, and therefore we understand that humans and all living things are involved in this grand struggle to survive. And so, since the humans are, and they store insulin preens, we might well understand that the insulin preen has also struggled to survive. But it's a much different question uh, to ask if the Hamlet soliloquy preen has struggled to avoid extinction. And we're going to show that it has, in fact, done that. Does anybody have any ideas about how the Hamlet soliloquy preen has struggled to avoid extinction?
Uh, for whatever reason, a lot of people that seem to like, I don't know, older literature seem to sort of idolize um, like Shakespeare and I guess his style. So for whatever reason, teachers really like to preserve this and keep teaching it, even if modern students don't really appreciate Shakespeare the way that people did back when Shakespeare was contemporary.
Right. When did you guys encountered Hamlet's soliloquy? Perhaps it was in a class. Uh, okay, hang on. Yes, Catcher.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add on to what Ryan said about I think it could be similar. You could look at it similarly as how like in some cultures or like before we actually could like write stuff down, important like mythicals, stories or like cultural stories would be passed down through generations because it's important to their identity or important to their way of life. Obviously, it's not exactly like that for Hamlet, but let's think similar to what Ryan was saying.
Yeah, and I think you guys are on the right path. Okay. So, yeah, how did it struggle? And what you guys said is certainly part of it. All right. Now, here I sort of wax poetic.
Like the gods of mythology, preens are immaterial but carry out their activities through humans and other physical things. Preens began their journey long ago and will continue it long into the future. We are merely evanescent creatures swirling in their wake.
Okay. So, uh, that's a sort of important statement that, how long have preens been around? Well, there were no humans to talk about them, but they've been around just like I could ask, how long have genes been around? Well, nothing living knew that they were around, but they still have been around for ballpark 3.6 billion years. And their lives and deaths, the preens, um, have been proceeding long before any of us were born. And they're going to go on even after we're gone. And in the meanwhile, there are going to be these preens out there, which are, as we know, not material, but are stored in lots of places. And they're going to impact our lives while we're here. And when we're not here, they're still going to do their thing and struggle to survive. Any comments, or is that depressing enough? Okay, so let's move on to the next chapter. As you can see, it's the resurrection of smallpox. And what this is really about for us is why there's an important difference between the old definition of what a gene was, the OED uh, definition, and this new definition where I call them genetic preens. So, does it matter? Are these two definitions really important? Uh, and this is an argument of why they're important and why the genetic preens version, I think, is preferable.
As we saw in What is a Preen? The insulin preen can be stored in DNA, RNA, and computers, and that DNA, RNA, and computers copies are equivalent in the sense that given a copy stored in one of these forms, we can create new copies stored in the other two. Traditionally, as reflected in the OED definition of gene, biologists have largely focused on genetic preens stored in DNA and RNA and have paid little attention to the implications of computer storage. This restricted view may have deadly consequences for humanity. Figure 4,
So this is an image of the smallpox virus. I kind of like it because it almost looks like it's a mask of some scary creature, which might be appropriate.
Figure 4, the smallpox virus. Dead or just playing possum? The following editorial appeared in the New York Times. For obvious reasons, I did not use the language of preens, but, at its core, that is what it is about. It addresses the question, has smallpox been eradicated? The world has always looked at this as a question of biology, that is, as a question about RNA and DNA, but when computers are given consideration, the view is strikingly different. By Leonard Adelman. Los Angeles. On October 16, 1975, 3-year-old Rahima Banu of Bangladesh became the last human infected with naturally occurring smallpox, variola major. When her immune system killed the last smallpox virus in her body, it also killed the last such smallpox virus in humans. In what is arguably mankind's greatest achievement, smallpox was eradicated. Our war with this smallpox virus was brutal. It appears likely that the virus killed about 1 billion of us. Initially, our only defense was our immune system, but eventually we developed new tools, including vaccination. In the late 1950s, the World Health Organization began responding to outbreaks by vaccinating everyone in the surrounding area to prevent the virus from spreading. By 1975, we had one. The smallpox virus had only a single host species, us. Other viruses have multiple hosts. For example, some strains of flu live in both humans and pigs, hence swine flu. If smallpox had had a second host, eradicating it in humans would have been of little value, since it would have thrived in its second host and later re-emerged in humans. A few samples of the virus are still kept in special labs, one in the United States and one in Russia. We don't bother vaccinating against smallpox anymore. If the virus escapes from one of these labs, the war will begin again. Currently, there is debate about whether these samples should be destroyed or kept for scientific purposes. But the debate should be broadened. Even if we destroy those samples, the war is not over. The smallpox virus has now found a second host. It is not the pig. In fact, it is not even what we think of as a living thing. It is the computer. This is not some conceptual game. This is real and life-threatening. If you search online, you can find the sequence for the smallpox genome. It is a word written with the letters A, T, C, and G. The word is about 185,000 letters long. It is the word that tells cells to make smallpox viruses. The sequence was stored on a computer in the early 1990s, when a research team led by J. Craig Venter obtained it using a biotechnical process applied to a sample of the virus. Of course, a word in a computer file cannot kill you. Well, yes and no. In the 1990s, I ran a biotechnology laboratory. In my lab there was a machine much like a soda dispenser, only in this case the reservoirs were filled with chemicals. If I typed in a short word of my choice using the letters A, T, C, and G, the machine would squirt one chemical after another into a test tube. When it was done, the test tube would contain trillions of molecules of DNA. Each would look like a necklace, with molecules of adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, the building blocks of DNA, strung according to the word I had typed. At that time, the 10,000 letter sequence of the HIV genome was available online. I contemplated using my machine, together with well-known biotechnical methods, to create, de novo, the HIV genome, an actual molecule identical to that found in HIV viruses living in the wild. I had reason to believe that inserting such a synthetic molecule into a living human cell would cause the cell to manufacture full-blown HIV viruses that could then be transmitted from person to person and cause AIDS. I decided not to do the experiment, but I began to worry. If I could do it, so could others with high-tech labs. Which brings us back to smallpox. Might someone resurrect it? You may think this is mere speculation, but in 2002, scientists used the approach just described to produce an infectious poliovirus. It is possible that the great labs, with great scientists, the best equipment and substantial funds, could overcome the considerable challenges that exist and resurrect smallpox right now. Before too long, more modest labs may be able to accomplish the same thing. I am worried, but also amazed. Smallpox has miraculously and unconsciously saved itself through an extraordinary act of evolution. After thousands of years, it was on the verge of extinction. It existed in one small girl, and just before that girl's immune system killed its last living member, a sample was taken and stored in a lab. Years later, that sample was used by another lab to sequence the viral genome. The sequence was placed on a computer, infecting a new species that had just come into existence. Do we sit and wait for the day when someone releases resurrected smallpox on an unvaccinated world? I'm a scientist, not a policy expert. But would it be wise for us to consider limiting the distribution of the tools of this emerging technology? So, at virtually the last possible moment, the smallpox genome prene made the leap from DNA storage to computer storage and was saved from extinction. I cannot think of an evolutionary miracle more remarkable.
By the way, can you think of an evolutionary miracle more remarkable than what the smallpox genome prene just did? Well, recently did. That is, as RNA and DNA, it almost stopped existing, but it jumped over to computers. And computers themselves had not been around for very long. You know, they were a 1946, I guess you could say, invention. And so it saved itself. And now it might even be resurrected back into human populations. Hopefully not. Okay. Anybody got an idea of anything that they've ever seen in biology that's more miraculous than that? Okay, I don't know of anything.
Soon, it will be common to see migration of prenes from nucleic acid storage to computer storage and vice versa. There are already some interesting examples. A group at the European Bioinformatics Institute, Goldman et al., 2013, has stored all of Shakespeare's sonnets, or, in prene terminology, the Shakespeare sonnet prene set, in DNA molecules. A group at Harvard, Shipman, Nivola, Maclise, and Church, 2017, has stored Muybridge's famous 1878 movie The Horse in Motion in a DNA molecule and placed it inside a bacterium. When the bacterium divides, the movie gets replicated, and hence the copy number of the Horse in Motion prene increases. With time, The DNA molecule is in each of billions of bacteria. Given a bacterium, the DNA can be retrieved, the movie recreated and then screened.
Okay, any comments or questions at this point?
I have one question. Oh,
Yes, please.
so does preen theory depend on technology? So obviously the idea that we can take um, this kind of biological genetic preen and turn it into a terine depends on our like technological ability to do that, right? So that only occurs if we've discovered that to happen. Is that a dependency for that to happen, or um,
Uh,
can we think about it in more abstract terms?
yeah, good question. Let's see. No, it does not depend on technology. Uh, so for some preens, uh, such as the genetic preens, they got along fine before we invented computers, right? So they weren't dependent on technology. But once computers are around, we see that they've exploited them. Okay. Now, this is part of a more general phenomenon that whenever there's a new vehicle, a new technological development that allows for uh, preens to be stored in it, you will see preens flood to that new technology to get stored in it. All right. So later I'll talk about what I call the the printing press extinction. So the printing press gave a lot of preens a new place to be stored in, printed documents. Okay. And it was really good at making lots of copies quickly, better than the technology that preceded it. And so we see a flood of actually battling literary preens trying to use that device and outcompete other literary preens from using it. So this is very general phenomena. When technology provides a new place for preens to get stored, especially if it can make copies really quickly, uh, then preens will flood to it. Where's the latest place we see preens flooding to a new technology?
I would hazard to say something like social media or yeah, social media, somewhere along that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say the internet in general, right? Because, when we talk about internet memes, these are the ones that have managed to use the internet, a place where they can be stored and very rapidly reproduced. Internet memes are the ones that have managed to get themselves onto the internet and then go viral, use its reproductive ability. And so uh yeah, I would say the internet is the new battleground of preens. Uh and and by the way, you see them struggling all the time. Uh how hard do you have to work to get rid of ads that pop up or feeds that you didn't intend to get, or this, that, and the other thing? I mean, you have to battle to keep those things out of your brain because they're trying to come out of the computer and get into your brain. So that's a good way to view what preens are all about. But it's not just that technology helps them and not just the invention of the computer. They've been exploiting technology for a very long time, especially since the Industrial Revolution.
So if I can
Uh,
follow up on this,
hang on. I think I got you. Oh, I was trying to. Yes, Jose Luis, I think you were.
yeah. So it's kind of a similar theme because I'm struggling a bit with the prim. So the prim, yeah, is this kind of physical representation of something like the DNA in a computer. But the problem is that that's not enough. You need to be able to interpret or to read that gene. So if somebody has been, I mean, Shakespeare's sonnet, just for a simple example, if I am a Chinese speaker and I don't know English and there's no more English readers anymore, is the prim, I mean, the prim information is still there, but nobody can interpret it. The same thing with the DNA on the computer. If you don't have the DNA synthesizing machine, then yeah, the code is there, but you cannot act on it. You cannot generate the virus that will infect everybody and kill them. So there's like some missing part there, and I don't know how to.
I don't think it is missing. What did we just see in this, editorial? We saw that uh, it kept potentially the the computer kept just it was only stored in a computer, and we didn't realize it when we stored it in that computer, but it kept the virus itself alive, or it may if people bothered to resurrect it. All it was doing is being a copy sitting there. Who would have ever expected that that copy would then somehow technology would allow it to get translated back into DNA and back into real viruses?
Yeah,
So the point is, as long as there's a copy someplace, that preen is not dead. It may be going dead. That copy may just, go away if it's, sitting on a bookshelf someplace. But while there's one left, amazing things like we just saw with smallpox can occur.
yeah.
That's why, oh, go
I mean,
ahead.
I get that. I think it can be dormant in a sense, but like we have, I don't know, linear B inscriptions, but we don't know what they say. I mean, they're still there. So there's something somebody wrote 2,500 years ago or something, but we still cannot read it. So
Absolutely. And another example comes from the Indus Valley, where you have a lot of little tablets on clay that have symbols on them, but nobody knows how to read them, right? And so those little tablets are storing whatever the person who wrote it, preen, some preen on them. But yes, those may be the you know graves of those preens. That is, those preens may be moribund. They may, if no one translates them, eventually those tablets will go away, even the ones in museums. And then, yeah, they will have gone extinct, right? If computer technology hadn't come along, maybe the smallpox genome preen would have also gone extinct, but it did come along. Okay, so good questions. Okay, another raised hand. I like this raised hand thing, by the way. Uh, please raise your hand again. I mishandled your hand raise.
Sorry, I unmuted. It's
Yes.
not letting me raise my hand again. I was wondering, so you said that the preens were kind of doing the acting of avoiding becoming extinct by being copied onto a computer, but it was a human who copied them. So how would you say that the smallpox preen itself avoided extinction? I feel like it almost got lucky.
Well, yes, it got lucky. By the way, you know, how lucky, if you consider it luck, is it that you're even here? I mean, you must be aware that the odds of that are astronomically small, right? But the things that do survive, that don't go extinct, the preens, are the ones that you could say got lucky. but we're surrounded by such lucky things. And yes, one thing to that's why when you boil all this down, what becomes important as maybe the fundamental concept is how many copies does a preen have? Because it's to some extent a representation of how likely they are to be around for a while. Because if it's zero, they're unlikely to be around. And if it's billions or trillions or more, they're very likely to be around, right? So this is kind of mathematical. It is the case that preens have copy numbers. And everything you're asking about, well, how did they get those copy numbers? And what good is a copy in this form or that form? Are perfectly right. But nonetheless, in a sort of mathematical way, we can just ask of a preen, how many copies numbers actually exist right now? Okay. And that's the most important thing I think we can ask about it. Okay. Another question, unless somebody's got additional questions. All right. Another question. Uh, so I talked about this Harvard um, experiment where they stored this old movie inside of a bacterium, inside of DNA. And that's another example. What good does it do the movie preens to get stored in DNA? Well, it's getting replicated there, right? And if something should happen that the movie goes away, but these bacteria survive, it's still available. It may never get resurrected, but it's there. Okay, so, but this is a question on another line that I want to ask now. What would happen if we took a bunch of these bacteria and released them into the wild? These ones that Harvard created. Good. Okay. This time I may do it right. Yes. William.
Yes, I think they will not survive very long. Because what use does this movie have for the bacteria to survive and replicate?
Perfect answer. Right. So if we release these guys into the wild, we put them in a pond. They still have to struggle to survive with mutants that may arise or new bacteria that may enter the pond, right? They're going to struggle for whatever resources there are. And so if you consider a bacteria, consider one of these Harvard bacteria versus the same bacteria where it never got the horse in motion preen inside of it. Well, bacteria have to replicate. Well, they don't have to, but if they don't, they're in trouble. Okay, and they replicate very fast. Until the resources of a pond they're in are exhausted or get near exhaustion, how fast do they replicate?
Exponentially?
Exponentially, right? They divide and then those guys divide and those guys divide exponentially. Right. Now, how fast do they divide? That is to say, what is the base of that exponential? Like, every hour it doubles or every hour and 15 minutes it doubles the number? Okay. But there is some doubling rate. Yes. And now, when you go inside the bacteria and ask, well, how fast is that doubling rate? To a large extent, it depends on how big the genome is, because you got to replicate that genome, right? That is the DNA inside, which Okay, so if one bacterium has a genome that's, let's say, 1 million base pairs, and another has a genome that's 1,100,000 base pairs, who replicates faster?
Smaller one.
The smaller one. That changes the base of the exponentiation, one could say. And when you have two exponential things going at the same time, the base is critical because the one that goes slower will very rapidly lose the war for population with the one that goes, well, I might have said that wrong. The one that can replicate faster will eventually just eat up the resources compared to the one that replicates slower. So these Harvard bacteria have this extra DNA in them, and they're replicating it every time the bacteria divide. So they've lowered the rate at which they can expand. And that means that compared to a bacterium that doesn't have to carry around the movie baggage, these guys would go extinct. Yes. So, and that, by the way, is something to keep in mind as we consider where the COVID virus began. Okay. Now, I don't want to get into current events, and well, I care, but when I'm being a preen theorist, I don't care where that virus began. Now, did it begin in that lab that people talk about? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But we see that creating a living thing inside of a lab does not mean that when you release it, it's going to go viral. It's a long way between its creation and going viral. So it's just something to keep in mind in that context. All right. So now let's move, unless there's further questions, to cultural prenes.
Cultural-prenes. What is a cultural-prene? Consider the extinct Maya society of the Yucatan Peninsula. Presumably, the Maya had prenes concerning law, religion, war, food, relationships, and lots of other things. Some of these prenes would probably have been stored in brains, for example as stories or songs. The Maya developed writing and stored some in stone, skin, and paper. Taken together, these Mayan prenes correspond to what social scientists might call the Maya culture. We will refer to prenes in this set as cultural prenes of the Maya culture and the set itself as the Maya cultural prene set. We have already seen a cultural prene of the English-speaking society, the Hamlet's soliloquy prene. Let's take a detour to address a few still unresolved issues. What exactly is the Maya cultural prene set? If we asked two Mayas what was in the set, it seems unlikely they would agree. This problem also arises in biology. What is the human genome, or more properly the human genetic prene set? With a small number of possible exceptions, e.g., identical twins, no two humans have the same genome. Despite this, the notion of a human genome is still useful. For similar reasons, I will continue to refer to a society's cultural prene set. Another unresolved issue is illustrated by considering the Hamlet's soliloquy prene further. I think it likely that a significant portion of members of the English-speaking society are familiar with it, and only a small portion of members of the Mandarin-speaking society are. Similarly, it seems likely that a significant portion of members of the Mandarin-speaking society are familiar with the cultural prene, the dream of the Red Chamber cultural-prene, while only a small portion of the members of the English-speaking society are. It seems that each prene is important in one society and of little importance in the other. In American society, it seems obvious that the First Amendment prene is more important than the your grandmother's cornbread recipe prene stored on a piece of paper in a drawer in your kitchen. In Darwin Turing Dawkins, Adelman, I have considered how to put this idea of importance on a more solid foundation. However, the issue is still not settled, so in this article, we will continue to think of importance informally.
So we're going to say, because intuitively we recognize that some preens are really important to a society and some preens aren't very important to a society. The question is, how can we, this is a question, it's not a critical question. What do you think? How could we, given a preen that's in the cultural preen set of a society, let's in this case choose American society, is there a way we can tell of that preen whether it's important or not? Any ideas? Should we look at its copy number to judge its importance? The preens that had the cultural preens of America that have the highest copy number, is that how we tell what's important?
Whether or not it's taught in schools, especially the earlier in school that it's taught, the more that someone with a lot of power has decided that it was important to be shared.
That is certainly part of what's going on. And my initial thought was that importance could be judged by copy number. That is, you just look at a preen, and even though you can't tell by looking at it, but it has a copy number. And that if it's a cultural preen of America and it has a very high copy number, it's more important than a preen that has a low copy number. That would make sense until you think of oh, who's the, I don't know who is, but who's the current leading pop singer? Taylor Swift, right? So she probably has, some song that has a huge copy number. That is, a good portion of all people have it in their brains. All American people, I assume. And it might even exceed the copy number of Taylor Swift's biggest hit, may even exceed the copy number of the First Amendment. Okay. But in another 100 years, I would think that maybe the copy number of Taylor Swift's song will diminish. But not so the First Amendment preen. It may diminish, it'll fluctuate and stuff. So I have another concept of what makes a preen more important than another preen in a society. It's not copy number, I don't think.
In Darwin Turing Dawkins, Adelman, I have considered how to put this idea of importance on a more solid foundation. However, the issue is still not settled, so in this article, we will continue to think of importance informally. All societies including religions, companies, nations, political parties, book clubs, family units, etc. have a cultural prene set.
So, like, consider your family unit, whatever you consider sort of your nuclear family to be. Does it have a cultural prene set? Does your family have inside jokes? Does your family, for example, believe that things should be handled democratically? Does your family believe that whatever team is the great professional sports team in your town uh, is the best team, and that their games should be watched? Shenghua.
So,
Hang on.
so one question is that, for example, you talk about the family that so one possible concrete prime there is I think for example in China there's a lot of family has this family book that passing generation to generation, and each generation not my generation anymore, that they used to work in this book has a sequence of writing, either poetical or something. And each generation, when they name the next generation, they use the next words.
Oh,
And they think that people just copy them, spread, in the branch of the tree.
yeah.
So that's why when, like certain family, including my parents' generation, when they get together, they can quickly know who actually is a few generation above because they kind of know.
I see.
It's almost like a print, right? To a large degree, it's
Well, I
copied
think it
and
is.
and is replicated, and
Right. Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, if I went to Thanksgiving dinner at Sheng Hua's house or any of your houses, uh, I might feel a little out of place, and I might, say things that offend people because I don't know the cultural preens of your family, right? I have to watch out about what I do because your cultural preens could be very different
not
than
in my
mine.
family. We can take anything.
Okay. Yeah. Um, okay. So, all right, let's see.
Cultural prenes provide a means of extending Darwinian evolution beyond biology and into the social sciences. Roughly, cultural prenes in societies are to the social sciences what genes, or more properly genetic prenes, and species are to biology.
Right. So this is the key sort of relationship that we were seeking out. This is the claim that the analog of genes is in biology is the cultural prene in sociology. Okay. Uh, and this I like this uh, this next line. Okay. People say, oh, that societies are all about this or all about that. What what do they say in that regard? Now, I probably haven't articulated it well. What are societies all about? Well, I'll just read it, but
While it is common to say that societies are all about money or all about power, they are not. They are all about the survival of their cultural prenes.
okay. So this is a strong statement. People always say, oh, it's all about power, it's all about money. It is not. It is all about the struggle of the cultural preens of that society to survive. That's what societies are all about. Okay. The struggle of their cultural preens to survive. And I'm going to, you know, show you how the cultural preens use people and of their society and other resources of the society for the purpose of their own survival, the preens' survival, not the people, not the money, etc. Okay?
How to be an unsuccessful cultural prene. The cultural prenes of a society are not permanent residents. They enter the society's cultural prene set, persist for a while, and then are forgotten, that is, the number of society members that store it in their brain declines to zero. Some persist very briefly, like the Y2K cultural.
I'm curious, do all of you know what the Y2K cultural preen is? Okay. Uh, in 50 years, probably only historians will know what Y2K meant.
Y2K cultural prene. Some persist for a substantial period, like those related to popular fashions, recipes, songs, plays, and movies. Some appear to persist as long as the society exists, like the Declaration of Independence prene of the American Society, or the Shahada prene of the Islamic Society. Informally, I call those that persist only briefly ephemera, and those that persist for a long time endura. I suspect that the important cultural prenes are typically endura, see DTD, endura and ephemera. The cultural prenes of a society have a substantial impact on the behavior of the society and each of its members. In this chapter, I will describe a cultural prene of a religious society that has had a huge impact, much of it negative.
Okay, so here is a picture of the Shakers. Okay, and I'll read the caption in this case. Shakers dance and worship. I saw in vision the Lord Jesus in his kingdom and glory. I was able to bear an open testimony against the sin that is the root of all evil, the doleful works of the flesh. Shaker's mother, Anne Lee, circa 1770. Okay, and by the way, if you look at the picture, yeah, I think you'll see that men and women are sort of segregated. There's a bunch of women, there's men. Even in this dance, the women are in a circle, the men are in another circle. Okay.
The Shakers were a Christian sect that arose from the Quakers in mid-18th century England. To the usual Quaker cultural prene set, they added new cultural prenes including the celibate prene, sex is forbidden. I'll skip the details, but guess how many Shakers there are today?
Okay. So, I assume a lot of you have read this, so know the answer. But, for somebody just viewing this, the guess would be none, right? If in 1770 you say that sex is forbidden, there probably aren't going to be a lot of Shakers around. And I would have guessed there'd be zero, but it turns out that isn't the answer.
No, you are wrong. Much to my surprise, the last time I checked, there were still 2 members, Wikipedia says. However, I suspect your answer will be correct soon. The celibate
Okay, here.
The celibate prene dragged the Shaker society down to near extinction. There are several reasons for this. Perhaps the most important is that the celibate prene foreclosed one of the most basic approaches that a society can use to increase membership and make new copies of some cultural prenes: have children. Human babies are born with an open channel through which prenes store in the parents' brains may be transferred to the baby's brain. The human genetic prene set arranged it to be so for its own survival. The reason is obvious. Getting the "don't put your hand in the fire" prene from your parents helps you and your genetic prene survive. The Jewish, Christian, and Islamic societies do not make the mistake of having the celibate preen in their cultural preen sets. The Hebrew Bible virtually begins with a copy of an anti-celibate preen. Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. Gen 128, KJV. Islamic societies specifically exploit the parent-child channel. Some of the society's cultural preens direct the father of a newborn to whisper into the baby's ear the first words the baby will ever hear, the Shahada. God is great. There is no God but Allah, Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Thus, at least in theory, the Shahada preen's copy number rises. When the Shakers Society first arose, it would not have been difficult to see that its cultural preen set might contain the seeds of the society's demise.
I mean, if they'd come to ask me in 1770, whether that was a good cultural preen, the celibate preen, I would have said, you're going to have problems with this.
I
However,
have one question here.
Demise.
yes,
My name is Yorgos.
Carlos.
What do you think? How do you think this analysis applies to kind of traditions like monks?
Good question. So monks do take a vow of celibacy, but as I recall, monks are part of Christianity. There are forms of monks in many religions, but monks per se are part of Christianity. And this is not a prohibition against sex in general. It isn't saying that the whole society can't reproduce. There can be no children. Monks don't reproduce, for that matter. Neither do Catholic priests, right? They're celibate. So when you get in a society somebody who's celibate and therefore forgoes this ability to add new members to the society, you can be pretty sure that those members of the society are contributing to the survival of the cultural preens in some other way. Right. So does a pope contribute to the survival of Catholic preens? He's celibate. He's given up, the ability to have children and add members to the society that way. But his goal is to preserve and expand Catholicism, right? So he's contributing to the survival of the cultural preens in a different way. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Can an analysis of the Jewish, Christian, Islamic, Russian, American, Republican, Democratic, and other societies' cultural presets reveal some of their strengths and weaknesses and provide a glimpse into their futures? I believe it can. In The Prophet and the Messiah, I will speculate on whether the Jewish cultural preset contains the seeds of its own demise. While we can see the potential negative consequences of the celibate preen, it is unlikely that many Shakers gave them much notice. It typically serves a society to have its members hold favorable views of the society's most important cultural preen.
Right. So the actual Shakers, presumably if they became Shakers, held very positive views about celibacy. Okay. Even though we, standing outside the society, could speculate that it probably wasn't going to help the society to survive. Okay.
For example, as an American, I have learned to cherish the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. However, as a prene theorist, I am less enamored. Freedom of speech, the press, and assembly are two-edged swords that can be beneficial in some settings and detrimental in others. Abraham Lincoln appears to have been aware of this when he suspended freedom of the press during the Civil War because it could be used to give aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States. Lincoln, 1864.
So, assuming that pretty much everybody here would know of the First Amendment, you probably, I don't know what you think, but I would guess that you probably think, what a great idea. All right. But is it a great idea? Well, yeah, I'm an American. I've spent a lot of time here. I think it's a great idea. But hang on a second. I'm going to go get something. Okay. So as you can see, I'm wearing my preen hat. Okay. When I'm not wearing my preen hat, I'm just Len, or Professor Adelman to the students. When I am just Len, I think the First Amendment of the US Constitution is a great idea. But when I'm wearing my preen hat, I have to look at it more critically. It's very hard to wear a preen hat because the other preens that are residing in your brain don't like being contradicted, and they will try to knock your hat off and very often succeed. So try at times to look at the world, not just as you, but with your preen hat on. That's what I'm doing here with the First Amendment.
It could also be argued that freedom of the press exposes governmental abuses and thereby provides a defense against dictatorship.
So perhaps you've sat around with your colleagues and friends and discussed issues like this. Is the First Amendment a good thing or a bad thing? Most of you not wearing preen hats would say a good thing, and might argue this point of view. It could be argued that freedom of express exposes government abuses and thereby provides a defense against dictatorship. That would be a standard argument. That's why it's such a great thing. But now I'm raising the idea that freedom of the press can be a burden. So, as Abraham Lincoln during war said, it can be used to give aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States. Not good for the cultural-prenes of America. All right. And now here's an important point about that argument and arguments that one hears in the world constantly.
We could argue endlessly about which position is superior. But our opinions are of little importance. The fate of the American cultural preset, and of American society, will be determined on the field of battle where it will struggle to survive against fierce competition from the cultural presets of other societies. From the prene theoretic perspective, the First Amendment prene is of value to American society only if it contributes to that survival.
Okay. So this is a very important point, that from the prene theoretic point of view, all of the gazillions of arguments that go on with people saying this is good, this is bad, in politics, not in politics and everything. From the prene theoretic point of view, that doesn't matter. What matters is whether a cultural prene of your society is helping that society survive or helping, more specifically, that prene to survive, that's all that matters. And the fate of American cultural prene sets are going to be determined as it competes with the cultural prene sets of other societies. Okay, and that's what really matters to a prene theorist. Okay, so I'm glad I could clear up with that all of the political issues that confront the world today. Maybe we should have a little discussion here. Do you guys believe this? I mean, this is pretty strong statement that essentially all these preens, you may like them, you may not like them, but it doesn't matter whether you like them or not. They're struggling to survive and they'll either do it or not. You can, okay, anyway, hopefully that is a different point of view than you're accustomed to having. All right. Now, how cultural preens organize people. And this will illustrate the difference between the traditional sociological view of things and the prene theoretic one.
How cultural prenes organize people. How does a person become a president, a monarch, or a pope? For example, how did Jorge Mario Bergoglio become Pope Francis? From the traditional view of history, much is known. He was born in Buenos Aires, had early jobs as a bouncer and janitor, joined the church and moved from priest to archbishop to cardinal and eventually to pope when his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, resigned. Wikipedia. There are numerous biographies that provide additional information.
Right? So this is how he became Pope. All right. However, that's not the cultural preens point of view. It's very different than the cultural preens point of view.
From the cultural preens view, Bergoglio became pope because the Catholic Society's cultural preens chose him for the job.
That is, the claim is that it's the cultural preens of the Catholic Society that picked Bergoglio to become Pope.
Job. More generally, a society's cultural prene set assigns positions, and therefore tasks, to members of the society. Here is how they do it. In many societies there are numerous positions that a member may hold. These positions are typically
Oops.
associated with rewards such as wealth, prestige, power.
There was a hand raised and I mishandled it, so let's see.
No, sorry, Professor, that was me,
Yes.
John here. I was gonna ask how exactly they did it, but it seems the text is going in that direction, so I'll
Yes.
let it finish.
But thank you for asking that question, because this does seem like a strikingly absurd thing to say, that the cultural preens selected him to be Pope. But yeah, let's have a discussion after I explain how they did it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
In many societies there are numerous positions that a member may hold. These positions are typically associated with rewards such as wealth, prestige, power, and personal satisfaction. It is typically possible for a member to move from their current position to another with greater rewards. Thus, the prospects of greater rewards provide an incentive for each member to attempt to advance from their current position to a more rewarding one. To advance, a member will typically be required to satisfy various conditions. For example, they may be required to demonstrate particular physical or educational attributes. They may be required to prevail in competition with others seeking advancement. Where do we find the positions that are available, and for each the rewards that accrue and the conditions that must be satisfied? In the cultural-prene set. For example, the U.S. Constitution stores cultural-prenes that describe the position of President of the United States, some of the rewards that accrue, and some of the conditions that must be satisfied. Similarly, the Apostolic Constitution, Universi Dominici Gregis stores cultural-prenes that describe some of the conditions that must be satisfied for obtaining the position of Pope. I'll call the set of cultural-prenes that determine the society's positions, rewards, and conditions, the positional cultural-prene set of the society. A society's positional cultural-prenes will act like a sieve, filtering out members who seek a position for which they are unsuited, and filling positions with members who are likely to have the attributes necessary to perform their tasks well. The behavior and efficiency of a society depend on the positions that are available, and the suitability of the members who fill them. For example, if there are many positions for warriors, and most are filled with competent people, then it is likely that the society will do well in wars. If there are many positions for farmers, they may do well in avoiding famine.
Okay, let's discuss this. So I'm saying that Bergoglio became Pope because from the time of his birth and even before his birth, the Catholic cultural-prenes had laid out this, it's not a hierarchy, it's really a network of positions. They specified what positions were available and the conditions that had to be met to achieve the next most rewarding position. And that by that process, the cultural-prenes, by setting conditions and dictating what the positions were, in fact, are choosing members of the society that will fill those roles well. And Bergoglio, when he was being a bouncer at some place, probably was looking for better positions to occupy. And in his society, there were many positions to occupy. And he eventually worked his way into the sub-society of Catholicism. And he still had these rewards that were driving him to move up. But there were others who were trying to move in those positions too. And they would compete for those positions according to the rules set forth in the cultural-prene set. And when he actually reached Pope, he had been chosen because he had all of the things that the cultural-prenes wanted him to have that would allow him to be an instrument of those cultural-prenes and do what? Mostly preserve the cultural-prenes. All right, so okay. Let's see.
Professor Adelman.
Yes.
You make the argument here that the positional cultural-prenes sort of are aligned with the attributes that are necessary to perform tasks well. I don't know if I completely agree with that because I think there are cases where the things that will lead you to power are different from the things that will make you a good ruler or a good person in that role. So in the example of democracy, to get to power, you just need to be good at convincing people to vote for you. But to actually be a good leader, you may need to do things that will not necessarily make you popular amongst your constituents.
Yeah, because it's not important that a president be popular among his constituents. It is important for the president, I mean, if he wants to get reelected or something. But what's important is that he uses the resources of the society in a way that protects the society, and in particular, its cultural-prenes. So, if you're going to become president of the United States, and we'll see this shortly, among the things that will happen is you're going to have to take an oath of office, right? And that oath of office is that you'll protect the Constitution. That is to say, in my language, the cultural-prenes that are found stored in the Constitution. There are many societies that will make their population very unhappy, the ruler of the society, if there's a single ruler, very unhappy. You know, what is the cost when a ruler takes his society to war? Well, it may be terrible, the cost of taking his society to war, or his or her society to war. But it may be necessary to preserve the society because otherwise it'll get overcome by another society that'll replace its cultural-prenes with additional ones. But let's talk about this topic for the remainder of this lecture because it's very important. More remarks? Okay, hang on. John?
Thanks, Professor, but I think Catcher was raised his hand before me.
Oh, okay, catcher. My bad. I see. Okay. I'm doing the wrong thing here.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, what does this like imply for like how emperors or leaders of like these societies that kind of overshoot and like Marie Antoinette or Nero or like Napoleon that lead to like just the downfall of like these societies. And are you are you saying that like the cultural-prenes are I guess perfect in their selection? And if not, then like what do you say about all of these
Yeah, no, they are distinctly imperfect in their selection. They're just doing the best they can because they can't control the environment that the society finds itself, especially with these other societies that would like to, take over its resources and stuff and spread its own cultural-prenes. All right. No, they're quite imperfect. But some of them succeed and some don't. So if George Washington had had lost, the American Revolution, uh, he would have been seen as a very imperfect leader, right? Um, but he would have been struggling to do the same thing, whether he won or lost. He'd have been trying to preserve the cultural-prenes of America. Yeah, sometimes you lose, and sometimes you use huge resources of your society to not lose. And Uh, so when you use those resources of your society, the cost can be terrible to the members of the society or to the treasury of the society. I mean, look at World War I, World War II, they were hugely expensive and bankrupted and, cost millions and millions of lives. But some of the societies that were involved in that war won and some lost. Okay. Yes, more comments, please. Okay, Nathan.
I think the other two are first if there's like a queue.
Well, there probably is, but oh yeah, there is a queue. Okay, hang in there, Nathan. I'll go
Okay.
to, yeah, thanks.
I guess,
Hello, John.
hi, Professor. So I was wondering that these positions that belong to the cultural preset, they change over time, right? So
Absolutely.
there was a time there was no farming, and then there was a time there was farming. And how should we think about the fact that the positional cultural preset is dynamic? Like, are we always changing society's preset? Like each individual member innovating by themselves, they're creating new positional preens, perhaps, or new other kinds of preens, and then how does that blend in with the rest of the society? And how,
Yes.
if you could just point us in the direction to how we
Right.
should be thinking about those issues.
Right. Wonderful question. So it is true that the positional cultural preens of a society change with time. Okay. And so, in much the same way that the gene set of a species changes with time, there's a process by which some form of mutation of that gene set takes place. Okay. And there is indeed a process by which mutations, I'll use that term informally here, of the cultural prene set occur. And that can definitely include the disappearance of some positions, the creation of new positions, the changes in the conditions required to get positions, the rewards, all that is in flux in much the same way that genes are. Okay. So, yeah, I love that question, and we will get to it. It's quite deep. Julian. Oh, it did something crazy.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Julian?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was gonna bring up a point that had to do with what you talked about before with like Abe Lincoln and like habeas corpus and like, preserving helping the United States.
Yeah.
Um, I think that there's kind of two ways you can look at the US. You can look at it as like the institution, right? Like a sovereign nation with its own control, and also maybe like American ideals, American culture, and like morals. So
Hmm.
if you look at maybe, yeah, like suspension of habeas corpus or like limiting press freedom, something like that, um, it might help the institution of the United States. It might put down any dissent and hide any misdoing of the government. But you could also argue that it goes against that those people are actually not true Americans, that it goes against helping the American preen and that it takes away from the moral teachings of like, the founding fathers saying we have to have these freedoms and that American culture is built on being able to express yourself no matter what you're saying or what it is. So maybe it goes against its own survival.
Yes. And by the way, one of the wonderful things about that question is questions like that are are essentially what's going on, because there always seems to be, when we discuss these things, different factors that should be included, shouldn't be included, right? You were discussing what it means to be an American, which is a cultural preen and stuff like that. And Abe Lincoln, well, anyway, so what I'm trying to do is look into this bubbling cauldron of opinions and views and say it's not just a bubbling cauldron of opinions and views, that there's some underlying prime mover, and that's the cultural-prenes. Okay. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, so anyway, great questions. Let's move on to the next discussion. Nathan?
I was wondering about leaders who kind of do the opposite of upholding cultural preens, like Hitler, or I think some similar thing happened in Yugoslavia, where the leader manipulated the population into abandoning their original preens in favor of newer ones.
Yeah, so Tito, I think is the guy you're probably thinking of. Let's talk about Hitler. Okay. How many like Hitler? Never mind. Probably not many. I don't. Um, but yeah, so let's talk about Hitler. Um, how did he get into office?
He was elected, right?
He was elected, right? Just in the standard way. He ran for office. Well, yeah, his party got more of the votes in their parliament or something, and he became chancellor. Okay. All right. Now, so he got his position like Bergoglio got his position because he, you know, followed the chain of breadcrumbs to that position, and it wasn't easy. He spent time in jail and stuff. Okay. So that's how he got his position. Now, what happened once he got his position? Then he said, well, I don't think we need these here elections anymore. Maybe we should just make me the leader for life, right? Okay, so this is an example of somehow he was able to mutate the cultural preens of German society. And all leaders of German society or American society have a great power to make those mutations. Okay, he mutated them, and it turned out to be catastrophic. On the field of battle with the other nations, societies, Germany lost. And then what happened in Germany, by the way?
They got weaker, their borders shrunk.
Yeah, their borders shrunk. Their borders expanded initially, right? He took over all of Western Europe, basically. And but then they shrunk. But not only that, uh, he was dead, and a new leader, I think it was Konrad Adenauer or something like that, took over. And what happened is Hitler's modification of the cultural preen set that once he had power, he modified that cultural preen set. Once he was out of power, it got modified back or transformed in such a way that the Hitlerian cultural preens were essentially cast off. Okay, but we'll talk about the nature of that dynamism more in chapters to come. So, so where are we on this thing that, okay. Anyway, I'm going to go to Jose Luis. Oh,
So
did I mess?
no,
Go
no,
ahead.
it's all good. So I think maybe I'm reacting in a similar way like the other questions. So your categorization of these cultural prenes in a society. So there's something there, but in a society, well, first you have to define what a society is. I mean, like a country like the United States or something like that, some collection of individuals. But intuitively, I think what happens is that many, many different prenes, some of which are actually opposite to each other. And maybe
Absolutely.
of a society, like there's some distribution of prenes. Some what believe in freedom of expression, and maybe some that don't believe in freedom of expression. So I mean, I'm still kind of curious to see where this is going, and maybe I should just hold my questions until I hear more. But I see it really more like this cauldron of things, and there's no kind of direction anywhere. Like it's a bit like in real genes. In real genes, I mean, like nature puts some pressure, and that's how genes some succeed or not succeed. But they're like all kind of random events. Like I don't know, dinosaurs were doing pretty well for millions of years until some kind of rock from space wiped them out. And Hitler, I mean, he lost, but I mean, because he invaded Russia, he may not have lost. So there are kind of things that are very random here, it seems. So I don't know where this falls into general kind of theory, but I'd be curious to understand more about it.
Okay, the last word for today, I'll give a partial answer. It is kind of random. That is, the environment changes, and you don't know how it's going to change. But those prenes that survive, or sets of prenes is more common, that survive, don't rely on randomness alone. They're very, very, very careful about how they allow themselves to be mutated. Okay, because they're trying to predict the future environment. Okay, so that's vague and everything, but that's going to have to do for today. So thank you, and I'll see you guys Wednesday. Bye. While I figure out how to get out of this.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you. Oh,
I'm sorry, what?
co-host.
What about co-host?
Did you want to add me as a co-host?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Got it, Joe. Okay, you're a co-host, I think. All right. So I wanted to pick up here. Okay. We had left off with this.
If the current copy number of a prene drops to 0, the prene has gone extinct. For example, we have found that some of Shakespeare's plays have been lost. So,
Professor, can you share your audio, please?
Thank you. Yes, I should have done that. Okay. Share audio. Share sound. Okay. Here we go again.
if the current copy number of a prene drops to 0, the prene has gone extinct. For example, It is known that some of Shakespeare's plays have been lost, so
Are you guys seeing oh, yes, okay. One more time.